She thought marrying a billionaire was her happy ending. Champagne wishes, diamond dreams, a love that seemed unbreakable. But when she gave birth to twin daughters instead of the male heir he desperately craved, everything shattered in an instant. Thrown out with nothing but two crying babies, she watched her fairy tale turn into a nightmare. He got his son. He got his perfect heir. He got everything he wanted. But years later, when his empire crumbled and his life hung by a thread, fate had one final devastating question. Would the daughters he abandoned become his salvation or his judgment?
Thanks to our existing viewers for your love and support. I really appreciate you all. And if you are just viewing us, please do well to like, share, and hit that subscription button. It really means a lot to us. Thanks as you do so. Now let's dive in.
They called it a fairy tale marriage, the beautiful bride and the powerful billionaire. But beneath the champagne toasts and diamond necklaces, a dark obsession was growing. One that would shatter everything. Sarah remembered the day Marcus proposed like it was yesterday. The helicopter ride over the sunset, the private beach, the ring that cost more than most houses. She'd felt like Cinderella finally finding her prince. The wedding was magnificent. 500 guests, an orchestra, flowers imported from 3 continents. Marcus had spared no expense. He'd looked at her with such intensity that night, whispering, "You're gonna give me everything I've ever dreamed of." She thought he meant love. The first year of marriage was blissful. They traveled to exotic destinations, attended galas where Sarah wore gowns worth small fortunes, and lived in a mansion with more rooms than she could count. Marcus was attentive, generous, romantic. But slowly, subtly, things began to change. It started with casual comments at dinner parties. "A man's legacy lives through his son," Marcus would say, laughing with his business associates. "That's why every empire needs a male heir, someone to carry the torch." Sarah would smile politely, but something cold would settle in her stomach. Then came the pressure. After their first anniversary, Marcus brought up children constantly. Not just children, a son specifically. "When are you going to give me my heir?" Marcus would ask, half joking but with an edge in his voice. "We have time, Marcus," Sarah would respond gently. "Time? I'm building an empire, Sarah. I need someone to leave it to, someone strong, a son." "What if we have a daughter?" she asked once. His face darkened. "Daughters end up in kitchens or in another man's house. They don't build empires. They don't carry legacies." The fairy tale was cracking. When Sarah finally got pregnant after 2 years of marriage, Marcus was ecstatic. He threw a lavish announcement party, already decorating a nursery in blue, already planning his son's future. "He'll attend the best schools," Marcus declared to guests. "He'll learn the business from the ground up. My son will be greater than me." Sarah touched her belly nervously. "Marcus, what if—" "Don't even think negative thoughts," he cut her off. "I can feel it. It's a boy. It has to be." The ultrasound appointment came at 5 months. Sarah lay on the examination table, Marcus gripping her hand tightly. The technician smiled. "Congratulations, you're having twins." Marcus leaned forward eagerly. 2 beautiful, healthy girls. The room went silent. Marcus's hand went limp in hers, and Sarah saw her entire world about to collapse. She held 2 tiny miracles in her arms, but he saw only failure. What he did next would haunt him for the rest of his life. The mansion was silent, except for the sound of newborn cries echoing through marble hallways. Sarah lay exhausted in the master bedroom, her twin daughters swaddled in pink blankets beside her. After 9 months of anticipation, she had finally given birth. But her husband, Marcus, stood at the doorway like a statue carved from ice. "Twins," he said flatly, his jaw clenched. "Girls." Sarah's smile faltered. "Marcus, they're beautiful. Look at them." "I don't need to look," he interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "I needed a son, an heir, someone to carry my empire forward, not this." The words cut deeper than any blade. Sarah knew about Marcus's obsession with having a male heir. He spoke about it constantly during her pregnancy, his legacy, his bloodline, his empire that needed a proper successor. "Girls end up in kitchens or in another man's house," he'd once said over dinner, laughing with his business associates. She had forced a smile then, hoping he was joking. He wasn't. Now, as she looked at her precious daughters, she saw Marcus pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. The gold-embossed logo of his attorney's office gleamed under the chandelier light. "Sign it," he commanded, tossing divorce papers onto her bed. "You've failed me." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the terms. No alimony, no assets, nothing but her clothes and the twins. Kicked out of the mansion she'd called home for 3 years. But what Marcus didn't know was that his failure had just planted the seeds of his own destruction. With 2 crying babies in her arms, Sarah stood on the street, watching the mansion gates close behind her. Rock bottom was just the beginning. The rain started as a drizzle, then became a downpour. Sarah clutched her daughters tighter, using her thin jacket to shield them from the cold. She had nowhere to go. Her family had disowned her when she married Marcus against their wishes. Her friends, Marcus's elite circle, had vanished the moment the divorce was finalized. She found shelter in a cramped single room in the poorest part of the city. The walls were stained, the ceiling leaked, and the neighbors were loud. But it was all she could afford with the little money she'd secretly saved from grocery allowances. Every night, she lay awake, listening to her daughters breathe, wondering how she'd feed them tomorrow. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Sarah worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at dawn, waitressing during lunch, and doing laundry at night. Her hands became rough and calloused, her face aged beyond her years, but she never complained, not once. The twins, Emma and Sophia, grew up wearing second-hand clothes and sharing a single pair of school shoes. They watched their mother skip meals so they could eat. They saw her cry silently in the bathroom when she thought they were asleep. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus had already moved on. 6 months after the divorce, Marcus married Victoria, a calculated, ambitious woman from a wealthy family. The wedding was extravagant, covered by every major media outlet, and exactly 1 year later, Victoria gave birth, a son. Marcus named him Alexander, the conqueror of his empire. He threw a celebration that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Champagne flowed, fireworks exploded over the city skyline. But as Marcus held his son for the first time, he didn't see the cold, calculating look in Victoria's eyes, or the nightmare he'd just invited into his life. Marcus got everything he wanted: the son, the heir, the perfect legacy. So why did it feel like he'd made a deal with the devil? Alexander grew up surrounded by excess. Designer cribs became designer clothes. Imported toys filled an entire playroom. By age 5, he had a personal tutor, a chauffeur, and more gadgets than he could count. Marcus showered him with everything except discipline. "He's the heir to my empire," Marcus would say, dismissing concerns from teachers and staff. "He deserves the best of everything." Victoria encouraged it. Every tantrum was rewarded. Every demand was met. She whispered in Alexander's ear that he was special, untouchable, destined for greatness. without effort. But she had her own plans. By age 10, Alexander was expelled from his first prestigious academy for bullying younger students. Marcus wrote a massive check, and the incident disappeared. By 12, he'd crashed a luxury car joyriding with friends. Another check, another cover-up. By 15, Alexander had formed a gang at his elite boarding school. They dealt in stolen exams, blackmail, and substances that shouldn't have been anywhere near campus grounds. The headmaster called Marcus personally. "Your son is a menace, Mr. Marcus. We've given him chance after chance, but how much?" Marcus interrupted, reaching for his checkbook. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about character, something your son lacks entirely." The line went dead. For the first time in his life, Marcus's money couldn't fix the problem. Alexander was expelled with a scandal so big that 3 other prestigious schools rejected his application on sight. Marcus sat in his office, staring at his son's file of incidents: theft, assault, intimidation, substance abuse. The golden heir was tarnished beyond polish. Victoria simply shrugged. "Boys will be boys. Besides, he doesn't need school. He has your company." Those words would prove to be the most expensive mistake of Marcus's life. While Alexander drowned in luxury, 2 girls in worn-out shoes were quietly preparing to conquer the world. Their secret weapon? A mother who refused to let them quit. Emma and Sophia sat at their small wooden table, textbooks borrowed from the library spread before them. The single light bulb flickered overhead as they studied late into the night. Sarah watched from the doorway, her heart breaking and swelling simultaneously. After her cleaning shift, she'd picked up their homework assignments from teachers who pitied them enough to provide extra help. "Mom, why do we have to study so hard?" 10-year-old Sophia asked one evening, rubbing her tired eyes. Sarah knelt beside her daughters. "Because knowledge is the one thing no one can take from you. Not poverty, not prejudice, not even your father." The twins had never met Marcus. They knew only that their father was someone who made a mistake. At school, Emma and Sophia endured mockery for their patched uniforms and shared supplies, but they never fought back with fists. They fought back with grades. Emma developed a fierce passion for justice, obsessed with understanding why some people had everything while others had nothing. She'd spend hours at the public library reading about law, rights, and fairness. Sophia, quieter but equally determined, was fascinated by healing. After watching her mother collapse from exhaustion one night, she'd decided she'd become a doctor, someone who could fix broken things. Then came the turning point. A national academic competition was announced, full scholarships for the top performers. Sarah scraped together the registration fee. "This is your chance," she told them, her voice trembling with hope and fear. The competition drew thousands of students from elite schools with expensive tutors and endless resources. Emma and Sophia arrived in their humble clothes, carrying worn pencils and second-hand calculators. The other students snickered. But when the results were announced 3 weeks later, the room fell silent. First place, Emma. Second place, Sophia. The twins had demolished the competition. A wealthy philanthropist in attendance was so moved by their story that he offered full scholarships, not just for high school, but through university. Everything changed in that moment. While Alexander's son was getting expelled, his abandoned daughters had just secured their future. 8 years later, the world had 2 very different stories to tell. One of triumph earned through blood and tears, the other of privilege squandered in spectacular fashion. Emma stood in her graduation gown, the university's highest honors draped around her neck. She'd graduated top of her law school class, already being courted by prestigious firms. But she had a different dream, to become a judge, to dispense the justice she'd been denied as a child. Across the stage, Sophia received her medical degree with distinction.
She'd specialized in emergency medicine, driven by memories of her mother's suffering in the countless people who couldn't afford basic health care. Sarah sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face. The struggles, the sleepless nights, the hunger, all worth it for this moment. Across the city, a very different scene unfolded. Marcus sat across from Alexander in his office, financial reports scattered across the mahogany desk. At 23, his son should have been ready to lead. Instead, he was the company's greatest liability. $18 million, Marcus said, his voice hollow. You've burned through $18 million in 6 months. Alexander lounged in his chair, designer sunglasses perched on his head. It's called networking, Dad. Those parties, those cars, that's how you build connections. Those aren't connections. They're parasites draining my company dry. Our company, Alexander corrected with a smirk. Or did you forget, I'm the heir? Victoria entered, placing a manicured hand on her son's shoulder. Marcus, darling, you're being dramatic. Alexander is just finding his way. Every successful man goes through a phase. Marcus looked at the woman he'd chosen over Sarah, at the son he'd prayed for, and felt a cold dread settle in his chest. That night, Marcus received a report from his security team. Alexander's networking included underground gambling, suspicious business deals with criminals, and parties where illegal activities were rampant. His golden heir wasn't building an empire, he was building a criminal record. And then Marcus's phone rang. 2 calls, simultaneously. His blood ran cold as he answered the first one. Mr. Marcus, this is the police. Your son has been arrested for... Before the officer could finish, the second call flashed on screen. Financial department. Urgent.
In 60 seconds, Marcus would learn that everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed, was crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide, and his precious son had lit the match. Marcus's hand trembled as he switched between calls. The police officer's voice was clinical, detached. Your son is being charged with vehicular manslaughter, driving under the influence and fleeing the scene of an accident. A family of 3 was involved, 1 fatality. He tried to bribe the officers at the scene. The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's grip. That's impossible. Alexander wouldn't. There's video evidence, sir. Multiple witnesses. And given his prior sealed incidents that we've now uncovered, bail is set at $5 million, but the prosecutor is pushing for no bail, given flight risk. Marcus switched to the second call, his heart hammering. Sir, you need to come to headquarters immediately, his CFO's panicked voice crackled. It's catastrophic. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the financial department, staring at screens that made no sense. Red numbers everywhere, accounts drained, investments liquidated. 90%, the CFO said, his face ashen. 90% of liquid assets gone. Your son had access codes you authorized last year. He's been siphoning funds for months, gambling debts, paying off people, funding some sort of underground business venture that collapsed. We're talking about $300 million, sir. Marcus's vision blurred, the room tilted. The cars, the parties, those investments he mentioned, all lies. He's been living like a king while bleeding the company dry. We maybe have 3 months before bankruptcy if we don't... Sir! Sir! He clutched his chest, a searing pain radiating down his arm. His breathing became shallow, rapid. The faces around him morphed into blurred shapes. He collapsed. The ambulance arrived within minutes, sirens wailing through the city streets. Paramedics worked frantically as they rushed him to the nearest hospital, the city's renowned emergency medical center. As they wheeled him through the automatic doors, a young doctor in green scrubs looked up from her patient chart. Her eyes widened in recognition at the name on the admission form, Dr. Sophia Martinez. She stared at the unconscious man on the gurney, the father who'd abandoned her, who'd thrown her and her sister away like garbage, who'd chosen a son over her daughters. Now, his life was literally in her hands. Her pager beeped. Another emergency. The judge presiding over a high-profile criminal case needed to be contacted about a defendant's medical emergency request. The defendant's name? Alexander Martinez. The judge assigned, Honorable Emma Martinez. Emma sat in her judge's chambers, reading the case file that had just landed on her desk. When she saw the defendant's name, her pen froze mid-signature. Some wounds, she realized, never truly heal. The courtroom was packed. Media crews lined the hallways. This was the trial everyone was talking about. A billionaire's son charged with vehicular manslaughter, fleeing the scene, and attempting to bribe officers. The victim was a young mother who'd been driving her 2 children home from school. Emma entered through the side door, her black robes flowing behind her. At 26, she was one of the youngest judges ever appointed, known for her brilliant legal mind and unwavering fairness. She took her seat, composed and professional. Then she looked at the defendant. Alexander Martinez sat beside his expensive legal team, looking bored and entitled, even in handcuffs. He wore a designer suit, his hair perfectly styled. He smirked at his lawyers as if this were an inconvenience, not a trial for someone's life. Emma's heart pounded, but her face remained neutral. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Martinez," the bailiff announced. Alexander didn't react to the name. Why would he? He'd never known he had sisters. Marcus had erased their existence completely. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Security footage showed Alexander's sports car racing through a red light at twice the speed limit. Witness testimonies described his stumbling, slurred speech at the scene. Toxicology reports confirmed elevated blood alcohol levels and traces of illegal substances. Then came the most damning evidence, the dashcam footage from another vehicle. The courtroom watched in horror as Alexander's car slammed into the family vehicle, spinning it violently. The footage showed him stumbling out, looking around, then speeding away as bystanders rushed to help. He left a mother dying on the pavement while her children screamed for help, the prosecutor stated coldly. And when officers caught him 3 miles away, he offered them $2 million to make it disappear. Emma's grip on her gavel tightened. She thought of her own mother, Sarah, who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd sacrificed everything so her daughters could have a chance. Alexander's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client requests a medical recess. His father has suffered a massive heart attack and is in critical condition. We request a postponement in consideration for bail reduction given these humanitarian circumstances." The courtroom murmured. Emma's breath caught. She looked at Alexander, who now wore a mask of fake concern. She saw through it immediately. He was calculating, trying to manipulate sympathy. Then her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. "Emergency. Dad needs you. Sophia." Emma faced an impossible choice, justice for a victim or mercy for the man who destroyed her childhood. 2 daughters, 1 courtroom, 1 hospital room. A father who threw them away now lies unconscious, his life in Sophia's hands. A brother who lived in luxury now faces justice under Emma's gavel. The girls who wore second-hand shoes and shared 1 pair of sneakers now hold all the power. Marcus chose a son over his daughters. He chose legacy over love. He chose wrong. Will they save the family that destroyed them? Or will they let justice and fate run their course? The answer will change everything. Drop a comment. What would you do? Part 2 coming soon.